So hi everyone. Thank you all for attending our Heart Gallery of Texas monthly webinar. So today we have, our topic is the Introduction to Trust-Based Relational Intervention, TBRI. My name is Cassandra Mendoza, and I am a training specialist with the Texas Institute for Child and Family Wellbeing at the University of Texas at Austin. And I'm excited today to introduce you to our presenter, Nicole Washington. She is the owner of CoHeart Support Services, in which they facilitate several evidence-based programs for child placing agency staff and foster adoptive parents and or any population seeking to create trauma-informed environments. Nicole has many years of experience working with families in the child welfare system. We're very excited that she has joined us. And so for this hour, thank you, Nicole, and please feel free to take it away. Like I said, if you guys please keep introducing yourselves on the chat, that way we know who's here. And then also at the end, we'll have a little bit of time for questions. So if you guys have any questions, please feel free to use the Q&A or the chat or wait at the end for your questions. But we're really excited to have you guys all here today. And yeah, Nicole, go ahead, take it away.
Well, hello and good afternoon. And thank you so much, Cassandra and UT, for this opportunity to introduce TBRI. And but before I begin, I would like to ask that you allow me the moment to thank each and every one of you for every selfless act, every bit of hard work, all of your dedication, all of your commitment, and your service to youth and families in all capacities that is available to you at this moment. Without each of you, we know that this work has to be done with the village, right? There's just not one person jumping out doing this work. So with that said, let's dive in. I would like to, excuse me, we're going to go over understanding TBRI. What is TBRI? It is trust-based relational intervention. It was created by the late Dr. Karen Purvis and Dr. Cross. And it is an attachment-based, trauma-informed intervention that is designed to meet the complex needs of vulnerable children that have experienced early risk factors such as difficult pregnancy, difficult birth, early hospitalization, abuse, neglect, trauma. Essentially, these children have experienced stressful, toxic environments. I like to take a moment to play a TBRI intro video that is narrated by Dr. Karen Purvis to really get us started with understanding TBRI. And this video is called Trust-Based Relational Intervention Introduction.
Okay, I'll go ahead and share that.
TBRI, trust-based relational intervention, has at its core building a trusting relationship. It has 3 sets of principles, and they look at the child as a whole. When you think about development, the baby cries and I say, yes, I will comfort you. And so this child learns that they have a voice. They learn trust, which is the lesson of the first year of life. I can trust. There are so many children from hard places, and for those children, their capacity to trust has been fiercely damaged. The brain chemistry of a child who cries and no one comes is dramatically altered. The child with a history of trauma or loss or abuse has no hope of healing without a nurturing relationship. In every way that I make time and space, that I give touch, eye contact, and I give words, I am going to empower this child to go back to the beginning of what he or she should have experienced in the arms of a loving parent that said, when you cry, I will come. The phenomenal thing about a trust-based intervention is, as we connect to this child, as we build safety, we actually change the brain chemistry. We change the wiring of the brain. This is really the heart and soul of all that we are and all that we do. Do I look into the child's eyes? Do I touch their arm when I talk to them? When they talk to me, do I stop what I'm doing and talk to them? This is the essence of mindfulness. The excitatory chemicals about I'm afraid, I'm hungry, I'm cold. Those are balanced when the caregiver comes and gives warmth. All regulation occurs first with an external regulator. So in the beginning, I regulate all. They're cold, I bring warmth. They're crying, I bring myself. And out of my regulation, their brain develops capacity for self-regulation. If this child didn't have this experience, that child doesn't feel safe. This chemistry can be altered, first by knowing they're safe, second by nutrient-rich foods, third by my environmental regulation of that child's emotion, and fourth by appropriate exercise. So we can balance brain chemistry by creating a holistic environment. We clearly have to deal with behavior. Correcting means showing a child the right behavior, praising him when he gets it, and showing it to him until he can get it right, and showing him with no fear and no shame, so that he builds success, not a greater sense of failure. So the message of hope for our families is that we can help our children to dramatic levels of healing. We simply have to be devoted to it and be willing to invest what it's going to take.
And so as that video was so good at pointing out is that this is definitely it's a holistic approach. And with that said, there's no one way that we can have it or add to a child's life and get them back onto the natural path. So who uses TBRI? It's used by birth, kin, foster, adoptive parents, or any professional of various sectors, such as foster care, adoption agencies, residential treatment facilities, group homes, juvenile justice, churches, healthcare and mental health providers, and even child care centers, just to name a few. But in whatever way we serve youth or children, it is my belief that as we do the work, at some point we encounter situations and circumstances that evoke reminders about our own childhood and whether it was healthy or not. For example, what was your experience with feeling heard and feeling or being seen as a child? Well, I have my own experience, and I have heard from others over the years doing the work that I do in the child welfare sector. Um, we've heard things like, do as I say do, not as I do, right? When all along we are examples for our kids, and our kids look to us in order to be able to regulate themselves in their environment, right? We've heard things like, don't speak unless you're spoken to. Oh, your feelings, they're hurt. You don't have feelings. We've even heard things like, until you can pay bills, it's what I say. Um, Over the years, I've heard people, this was a big one, my house, my rules. And it almost made you feel like I absolutely have no say so, right? And then there's the big one, the really big one. What goes on in my house stays in my house. Another huge one that allowed us to not say, even when things weren't going right, that we couldn't even say that they weren't going right, whether it was for us or a sibling. And so this in no way is an attack on our parents, right? Because we know that there's no such thing as a perfect parent. We must consider that all of the experiences that they had in their lives as well. Parents can only give what they have the ability to give, right? Or what they've experienced. If you never heard any of some of the things that I've said, or if that takes you back, I'm sure that there are other things that you've experienced in the past or in your childhood that wouldn't come to mind. Nevertheless, there may have been times when we have believed or heard or experienced in some shape, form, or fashion that we were not seen and we were not heard. Now, when we think back to that, I want us to kind of consider, how did we feel in those moments? How do we, or How have we showed up in our relationships, in our lives? And so then that alone provides us with empathy for the children that have experienced any sort of stressful environment. Let's take a look at what TBRI says about the importance of safe and secure relationships and how we form those lasting connections. We will begin with the brain. Every child will experience milestones in utero, ages 1, 5, 8, 12, and 16. However, for vulnerable children, trauma interrupts the natural path of the brain, just like the video indicated, and healthy connections become challenging, and empowerment is very much impeded. Here's a short video I would like us to take a look at. It explains the effects that toxic stress has on the brain.
1 second to share again.
As we develop, our brain produces 250,000 neurons every minute. By birth, we'll have 100 billion of these miraculous building blocks. But in order for our brains to fully function, we'll need synaptic connections to organize and build networks. Who we become and how we function depends entirely on how these networks develop, and our interactions with others and how we've been treated determines everything. From functions like heart rate, breathing, and basic emotions, to personality, decision-making, language, social behavior, and voluntary movement. We know that severe or prolonged abuse or neglect derails that building process, even in the womb. Distress and high anxiety in the mother allows cortisol, the stress hormone, to cross the placenta and disrupt development. When the toxic stress response is activated repeatedly, brain development and even immune systems are disrupted. Research has shown that high doses of stress hormones inhibit brain function and impulse control, overbuilding the fear center and the part of the brain that's critical to emotional regulation. TBRI uses 3 sets of principles to begin the healing caused by toxic stress. By recreating the developmental process, TBRI strives to introduce the nurturing that was absent in those toxic situations. And for the child who has endured toxic stress, healing must begin with a sense of both physical and emotional safety, something this child may have never known. Connecting principles are designed to create and nurture healthy relationships through sensitivity, consistency, and availability to disarm fear and gain trust. Giving full attention, using a gentle voice and kind facial expressions and body language are just a few of the ways to help build trust. Punitive and controlling responses only feed a child's mistrust and fear. Empowering principles are designed to meet physical needs, including sensory regulation, nutrition, and hydration, and strive to be aware of environmental issues, such as overstimulation by light, noise, or smells that can trigger behaviors that often leave caretakers baffled. The goal of the correcting principles is to help guide a child through day-to-day strategies, by correcting fear-based behaviors and establishing felt safety, helping a child regulate their emotions, tell their stories, and learn through playful engagement. The Adverse Childhood Experiences Study examined the effects of multiple types of abuse in childhood, and the staggering results showed that high doses of childhood adversity affect brain development drastically, leading to addictions, attempts at self-medication, impacted immune systems, chronic inflammation, and autoimmune diseases. The greater the number of traumatic events, the greater the damage. TBRI can help stop this ugly cycle. There is hope for the damaging effects of toxic stress, but it will take dedication, education, and most of all, understanding.
Understanding. Wow. I know that in our own lives as adults and as parents and as caregivers and as professionals, that's really all we seek is we not always seek, but that is a great thing to have someone to understand us, right? Um, Let me ask you just a question, just something to kind of think about. What happens in your brain when you experience trauma, loss, or stress? How does that show up? I can honestly say that my mind begins to race. I don't hold a thought long. Um, there's brain fog. And then even engaging in irrational thinking that um, things are happening that may not have happened the way that they happened because of the toxic stress or because of a loss or a trauma. And so and even thinking like that, I must understand that a child from a toxic background will have a cycle of damage. And it is up to me as the parent, as the professional, as the caregiver, to make a decision on how I want to show up for this child. Because if I'm coming in hot and stressed out and dysregulated, they're gonna see that. And then that becomes a way for them to continue on with their patterns of toxic behaviors that they essentially have learned from their own background. So then the question becomes, how do we catch up? So catching up essentially means that we focus on a few areas in order to change various paths for children who have experienced toxic, stressful environments. I like to zero in on one area in particular right now, and that's creating attachments. And I know that we've all heard about, most of us have heard about attachments, what that looks like. I think the best way to really hear what attachments is to hear from Dr. Cross as he narrates this short video about what attachment is and how it affects relationships.
Young children use their attachment figure as a secure base for exploring and coming to understand the world. When they feel safe, they will venture out and explore the physical world and explore the social world. That sense of felt safety is a crucial aspect to feel good about moving out into the world. So building attachment is a matter of building connection. And that programming makes us resilient, sensitive to other people's needs, sensitive to our own needs, and a healthy, well-functioning human being. In secure individuals, we see that rich set of connections. When we talk about attachment, we're talking about the dance between a parent and a child. How well we're able to dance together will determine how well they're able to dance with other people later in life. We also know that my ability to dance with my child is determined by my past to a large extent. Well, we know that infants who become securely attached have parents sensitive to their needs. But here's the key thing. If they're separated, secure babies look distressed, but the avoidant babies did not look distressed. So they learn to mask this internal state of fear and anxiety, and that's the origins of the avoidant adult's experience. A person may do fine in situations that don't demand interpersonal connection, but when they demand that interpersonal connection, they begin to flounder. An ambivalent baby looks like a secure baby. They can be hard to distinguish. Both babies are distressed when the attachment figure leaves. The difference is what happens once they actually reunite. An anxious ambivalent baby, they want to be reunited, but once they're picked up, they may push away a little bit, or they may be stiff, or they may kick their feet. We know from research that parents of anxious ambivalent infants have only been available inconsistently. There's a fourth classification, and that's called disorganized. A disorganized baby has no clear pattern to the way they respond. The person who should be providing them security is a source of pain and hurt, and that shows up in their behavior. When attachment is derailed, we have kids who look angry, can't regulate their emotions. In TBRI, we talk about principles. Well, the connecting principles are designed to promote the kind of relationship that leads to secure attachment. And the engagement principles especially make a difference for children who come from hard places. So it's structure and nurture. But the good news is there's the hope that comes from knowing that this can be done. And the path is awareness. The path is mindfulness.
And what a great way to lead us into, our next portion on the importance of how do we catch up. And we'll go over some more of those things in a little bit, but I do want to go back and kind of reiterate what Dr. Cross said in that video about when attachment derails early is never ever put back, excuse me, early, and if it's never ever put back on track, then we have adults who continue to struggle with relationships. To put this point in perspective, I want to go back to how that video mentioned 4 attachment styles. It talked about the secure and that child having a safe person that will meet their needs. And then the avoidant is the independent child, and emotional needs are not met. A lot of times we see that child, they're independent, they go play, they you never hear from them, and we think, oh, that child is the best child. That's the child I want to babysit. That's the child, they rarely need anything. That's a good child. And then you have the ambivalent child. That child is anxious and confused. Emotionally, their needs aren't met, and they're kind of all over the place because of the anxiety. And then you have that disorganized child. That child is fearful of the caregiver. This is when the child learns unhealthy strategies on like aggression. I'm going to hit and get what I want. Violence, manipulation, control, just in order to get the things that they want to meet their needs. For every infant style, there are 4 attachment styles that were also indicated in the video. For that secure baby, they become secure adults. They can give and receive care. They can negotiate their needs. And they can be their real selves. They bring their real selves to the table. And then you have avoidant babies who then could turn into dismissive adults, emotionally closed off, no detailed memory of the childhood. And then they rely on things more than they rely on people. Things and objects, because things and money become more important to them, or more reliable, I should say, than people would be. And then you have the ambivalent child who then becomes the entangled adult. That person is angry, they're resentful towards the parents, and they're intrusive in their caregiving style, and even in relationships. And then you have the disorganized child becoming the unresolved loss and trauma adult. That's where they mentally just check out. There's a dissociation to everything, and they're unable to be present as they would need to be. Some of the other ways that we can catch up, we talked about attachment, but there's also building trust and self-worth, self-efficacy, which is giving voice, and then sensory competency, and then social emotional competency, and then brain chemistry. So when we talk about trust, that is developed over time with lots of effort. TBRI suggests of many ways to develop trust with children is to share power now and give choices. Now, I do understand that a lot of us come from backgrounds where you scream like giving choices, like we didn't have a choice. So why are we giving choices now? Well, as we grow and as we learn and experience and raise our children, we know that I like to say that we are raising little adults, because we are teaching them how to be loving, kind, and productive in the society. And so when we were kids, it was you get what you get and you don't throw a fit, right? And but however, we know that providing children choices empowers them, right? And it creates an opportunity for them to increase trust. As indicated in the video earlier, children learn trust within the first year. You cry, they cry, we come, they cry, we come. That means that their needs are being met at a consistent base. When they cry and we come, that provides nurture. It is a proven fact in our own lives, I believe, that we trust those that meet our needs, that are always there for us and offering a helping hand and or just a listening ear. Then we have self-worth. It is developed when we spend time connecting and regulating on a consistent basis. When we recognize the children, when we recognize our child's preciousness, we make eye contact with them and we are providing them with healthy touch. That is building self-worth. That is letting them know that they mean and they're valued by us. Then there is sensory competency. This is when attention is given to sensory needs, which could include calming objects like fidgets, but also includes hydration, nutrient-rich food. We're thinking about what's going on for auditory, their sight, smell, taste. This also includes calming objects. We can definitely use those like fidgets and weighted blankets and things of those natures. But being aware of what happens when, or being mindful when a child walks into a room and it's too loud. They started to stick their fingers in their ears. The smells, you can watch their eyes and you see that when we smell it and you take a look at them and you see that their eyes become very, very wide. And even with textures, tasting different foods, we even have issues with, certain foods. Some people say they can't have jello, cottage cheese, or yogurt, or things of that nature. Well, our kids, they're experiencing the same things too. The only thing is they don't have the bandwidth to be able to say, this is giving me sensory issues. Some kids are sensory seeking, some kids are sensory defensive. And we'll touch on that a little bit more in a little bit. Social emotional competency. That's the next one. Children learn to self-regulate and they learn coping skills. They learn to problem solve appropriately, right? Appropriate problem solving and conflict resolution. Appropriate conflict resolution. So important. Not the manipulation, not the control, not the aggression. They develop positive relationships and then practice teamwork. We know to live in this society, to live in this world, we have to be able to work with a team in order to be successful. Then there's brain chemistry. That is balanced by creating those environments that feel safe and that disarms fear through healthy and nurturing relationships. An environment filled with opportunities to regulate emotions and meet needs, and even the opportunity to have appropriate exercise is so important. We realize that the brain is fed through movement as well. And even us, if we're sitting stationary for too long, something tells us, I got to get up from here. I got to move. I need to be able to walk outside and get a little sun. I need to be able to go get a drink of water. I need to go to the bathroom. I just need a woosah moment, right? And so our kids, they absolutely feel the same way as well. And especially those kids that have experienced toxic environments. So as we see, catching up takes work, but we also see that it has so many benefits that can be, and it can be done. I like to turn our attention to the principles, the TBRI principles. And as you can see on the screen, it talks about connecting principles, the mindfulness strategies, the engagement strategies. Then we talk about the empowering strategies, the empowering principles. That's the physiological strategies and the ecological strategies. And then the correcting principles, proactive strategies and the responsive strategies. And I am going to do my best to get through them as quickly as possible. So, the intention is to create, is to be able to.
Nicole, sorry, I don't mean to interrupt, but you're not sharing your screen right now, so we can't see anything.
Oh, no, I thought you could see it. My apologies.
No. I think when I shared the video, it took your screen off.
Gotcha.
Okay, there we are. Yeah, yeah.
There
Thank
you go. My apology. Did not know. Okay. Thank you for letting me know. And so those are the TBRI principles, and we're going to go through those pretty quickly. The intention is to create a foundation based off of lots of connecting, followed by empowering and appropriate correcting. We're going to take a look at how to increase connections with youth while also empowering them in the process. The best way to ensure that we connect and empower is to focus the lens on ourselves, though, right? Can't forget about us. It is important to recognize our own strength. Okay, we'll just talk through that one. I'm not sure why that won't advance, but it's important for us to recognize our own strength when assessing foundation. As as we don't want to be heavy on correcting and low on connecting. I'll say that again. We don't want the foundation to be very heavy on correcting and very low on connecting. When connecting is low, and when that's a low priority, very little empowerment happens, and connection rarely happens, but correction becomes the focus. When correction is our go-to every time, it's not a healthy or appropriate at all for either party. Lots of correcting leads to mistrust, loss of voice. It could lead to behavioral issues, manipulation, anger, shutdown, violence, and then perpetrating on others. To have a child to perpetrate on another child because they've learned that correcting is the go-to, and that's the way that I get what I want when I want it. And so many more I could name, but the environment has no room for empowerment at all. Now, when connecting is the priority and that is the foundation, then relationships empowerment becomes very natural, and correcting is done with healthy intentions. So, connecting principles, let's talk about that. Those are mindfulness strategies and the engagement strategies. These help in establishing trusting and meaningful relationships. Mindfulness strategies, this examines one pass. This is where caregivers become aware of what they bring to the table in the interaction with the child that they're caring for. Becoming conscious of our own relationship histories as well. Understanding the attachment cycle is valuable while building trust and creating safe environment. The attachment cycle provides a map of what normally happens in the first year of life between the parent and child. As the video said, that there's a dance. To establish healthy and appropriate attachments, the child's needs are met consistently. Needs that include the brain, the body, and the environment. When needs are not met, children experience chronic distress on a path to a behavioral dysregulation, symptoms of ADD, ADHD, depression, anxiety, and bipolar, just to name a few. Ultimately, the attachment cycle lays the foundation for trust. And that trust uh, that trust from a safe adult meeting their needs. Self-worth, this is where they feel worthy of love and care. Self-efficacy, the voice is heard, and there is no need to use those survival strategies that we mentioned before. And then self-regulation, they experience healthy co-regulation, which teaches skills to appropriately self-regulate. Good mental health habit. Do what you need to do to mentally be okay. Talk to someone, pray, take some time to be alone, ask for help. These are really key elements for our child to move on to their next phase of life, their next phases of life. And then we have the engagement strategies. That's connecting with the child non-verbally, such as healthy touch, eye contact, behavior matching, playful engagement. And when I go back to that eye contact, that can really make a difference, because if we get that stare down, so many of us become so fearful, when we get the stare down from our parent, but to have loving and kind eyes and to be able to say, I saw what you did, but come here. Come in closer. Let me give you some guidance here. Safe and healthy touch releases chemicals in the brain that reduces stress. Playful and kind eyes, they provide increased connection. And then behavior matching, that's like mirroring their body language, choosing same likes, like the same color or the same flavors or the same scent, just so that they see that you're with them, right? You're being with. And then playful engagement and interactions that communicate safety and disarms fear. Then we have empowering principles, the physiological strategies, and the ecological strategies. This helps children to learn the important skills like self-regulation. Well, physiological strategies, excuse me, focuses on the internal physical needs of a child, such as hydration, blood sugar, their sensory needs. When talking about sensory needs, we're referring to auditory, sight, taste, smell, which we named before. All of these can affect how a person experiences their environment. It is also time for us as caregivers to determine whether a child is sensory defensive or are they sensory seeking. Defensive, that means that they're moving away. The sensory seeking, they're in search of. When they start to run in circles, crash and bump, things of that's sensory seeking. It is up to us to provide our child with ways to meet their needs, that and in meeting those needs, that they feel empowered. Then there is the ecological strategies. This focuses on a child's external environment, and guide the child towards learning self-regulation skills when it's time for transition, daily rituals, or scaffolding. Scaffolding meaning the external regulation, the co-regulation, and self-regulation. So external regulation, that occurs during the first year of life, where caregivers regulate for both physical and emotional needs of that child. But then when we have co-regulation, that occurs during toddler and preschool years. Children and caregivers, they work together to meet the needs. And that's why it is so important that we are there and we show up with and making sure that we're mindful when we do show up, even with our own stuff, working through our own stuff before we show up, because that co-regulation piece is at that time of their lives, they are so dependent on us. And then there's self-regulation that occurs during early childhood and beyond. Begin to regulate their own emotions and emotional responses. And so there's a scaffolding that happens. Externally, I'm getting my needs met. And now I have someone to help me work through getting my needs met. Co-regulation is happening. And now this allows me as this adult to now have my regulation needs met, or to meet my needs by self-regulating. Next, when we talk about correcting principle, that's the proactive strategies and the responsive strategies. The correcting principles help our children to learn behavioral and social competence. Proactive strategies, that's designed to teach social skills to children during calming times, practice decision making, learn about character, like being respectful, asking for permission, being gentle, being kind. This teaches children that safe adults are listening and hear their voices, which in turn teaches them how to do the exact same thing. Responsive strategies, this provides the caregivers with tools for responding to challenging behavior. So this is where we come in, where we show up. These tools are precise. They provide caregivers with support, because When we go back to the beginning, what did I say? There are no perfect parents. And there are times where we may get it wrong, even when we have this whole plan in our brain on how we're going to respond and what we're going to do when this happens and when that happens. In the moment, there are things that will and do happen. It's how we recover. And so being able to go back and um, use those proactive strategies that we are teaching our children, we model those for them, and being able to go back and say, I want to apologize. Is it okay if I come into your room and talk with you? Is it okay if we have a conversation now? Because again, we go back to those self-regulation tools that we taught them. They may say, I need a moment. And we need to be able to provide them with a moment because we taught them that. Even when we're ready to have the conversation, they may not be ready to have the conversation. And because they are children, sometimes we get in our brain, no, things need to happen when I say they happen because I'm running the show. We have a whole viewpoint on what the day should look like, what should happen in the household. We know all the intricate details. They may not. However, we still have to make room and make time for them to be able to say, I can't right now. Quick little funny story. I have a friend, she's raising her grandchild, and um, when she is giving him quite a few little commands about you need to clean your room, you need to do this, why did you leave your shoes here? You need to pick those up. He will stop in the middle of the floor and scream, it's too much. While this is a funny thing, it's a funny little story that she and I go back and forth about when we're talking about something and we just say it's too much. Um, it was him in a safe environment. He was able to say to his grandmother, this is too much. Slow it down. Take me one step at a time, or let's take a break. Let's take a breather. That's a real thing. How many times have we had to show up in that same capacity and be able to say, hey, stop. This is too much. I need a minute. I need to self-regulate. I need to pull out my tools and remember how to really ask to get my needs met. I had somebody say to me the other day, we're adults, we're too old not to be able to ask for our needs, right? And so for kids, that's not always the case, especially for kids that are coming from environments that are not safe or that are stressful or toxic. And so the caregiver, and when we're using those responsive strategies, it is intentional with how we approach the correcting with loving and consistency and meaningful interactions. Sometimes being able to step away ourselves, take a break, and say, how do I want to show up? Because I know this could be a lifelong lesson, right? So overall, it's imperative that we as caregivers assess ourselves first, that we be intentional as much as possible, because again, we're not perfect, and then to show grace to ourselves and to our children and to the children that we encounter, even outside of our own children, right? Or the children that we're working with or working for. But showing grace to ourselves, kids being allowed to see the grace that we show ourselves, that makes the environment so safe for them. Because if we're not down on ourselves and we're not beating ourselves up because the interaction or the day or argument didn't happen the way that we wanted it to happen, and we still can come back and recover, not just with them, but even recover with ourselves. So it is my hope that the information shared about TBRI and the principles that make up the program increase your awareness that deep, meaningful relationships begin with connection. It begins with trust, and not only doing that for the kids that you serve, but connect also with yourselves and trust yourselves. And so that is my presentation, a TBRI introduction. Thank you all so much.